Hello and welcome back to my channel. So today I thought I'd share with you a story, the story of my journey to diagnosis with fibromyalgia. Two facts that I became aware of at the beginning of the journey was fibro can be triggered by an accident at some point. It doesn't have to have just happened, it could have been quite a long time before. And accidents and me, well, you could say at times I've been an accident waiting to happen, so I'm going to make a whole separate video about accidents. The other thing that can trigger fibromyalgia to appear is a big event, a stressful event, and my symptoms arrived 2 to 3 weeks after my wedding day. The wedding itself obviously wasn't stressful, it was a great day. But in the build up to it, there was so much to plan and to organise. Being a crafter, I made all my own invitations, and naturally it did get a bit stressful. I'm sure everybody involved, the bridesmaids and the bridal party, will all agree I definitely wasn't a bridezilla though. It was just a healthy level of stress leading up to a wedding. So, we've got a big event just happened and various previous accidents which, as I say, I'll tell you about in the next video. So what happened then, a couple of weeks after the wedding? Pain started. I started taking, standard over-the-counter medications quite regularly, really. And so much so that because I'd been taking ibuprofen, I began having really bad stomach pains to the point I actually had to leave work and go to casualty. They did various tests and so on, and they came back to me saying that it was probably due to ibuprofen use and to stop taking ibuprofen. So I had an initial starting point. Okay, I can't take ibuprofen then because I have stomach problems. So I carried on with my paracetamol for a while, but it really wasn't working, it wasn't controlling the pains I was experiencing. So I spoke to my GP and I was given a prescription of Cocodamol. And I ticked along for a little while with the Cocodamol. Excuse me, running my hands through my hair. It's a boiling hot day again. Surprise, surprise, England hot all the time. Back to the story anyway. So I spoke to the GP, got the Cocodamol, and I was still in an awful lot of pain. I was finding I was worn out, I was leaving work early, day in, day out. It became my normal routine to finish work a couple of hours early for a while. The other complication was that I was exhausted because I just couldn't sleep properly because of pains. So the GP again prescribed me, this time they prescribed me some amitriptyline, which I initially started off with a 10mg dose. The first night, amazing, it was like it knocked me out. And I progressed with that, and I was finding that I could do my job relatively well, but certainly not to the previous full hours. This new pattern of finishing early basically ended up becoming my new working hours. We had to change them because of my symptoms. At this point it was just symptoms. I was seeing the GP. At that point the GP was doing more blood tests. I was a bit of a pincushion for a while, and blood tests themselves are their own separate horrors for me. I've written at least one blog post about them, so you can certainly pop over to my blog and read about my experience with blood tests. Things were ticking over, taking the Cocodamols, taking the amitriptyline, the 10 dose. A few months later it went to 20. At some point it escalated to 30. My current dose is 40mg, and we've kept this as a level because on the relatively lower doses amitriptyline is really good for nerve pain, which is my issue. The higher doses are meant for depression, and other than fleeting bouts of depression, I don't suffer from depression as a rule, and apparently it's not a particularly good drug for depression anyway, but it does its job for nerve pain for me. During this time, as things ticking over but really needing some sort of answer, the GP referred me to a rheumatologist. It took a couple of months or so waiting for the appointment with him, and probably in the whole journey, the appointment with that particular rheumatologist was the worst part in hindsight. I remember they were running late, unfortunately, so I'd had to come out of work for this appointment, and I'd been sat waiting for over an hour, but that's by the by. I know NHS resources are stretched. But I was called in, and before we even got into the room where he was going to see me, he was stood watching how I was walking, and he just said, "Oh, I love watching you walking." Not. Okay. And we got into the room, and he described this as stilting. And he asked me to describe the problems. I did mention the pain, but I also mentioned the exhaustion and, you know, just the general feeling that things aren't right. It wasn't a consistent pain, like if you've sprained something or twisted something and that limb, that area hurts. It was all over, and it was coming randomly for no particular reasons. So I described all of these things and mentioned that I'd started doing my own little bits of research and I'd come across the diagnosis of fibromyalgia. At which point he told me, "Oh, I don't believe in fibromyalgia." And, you know, as a person that is new on this journey, it's just something you've read about on the internet, and this is a respected consultant, medical profession, you can't help thinking, oh, perhaps it's wrong what I've read then. Perhaps he does know. And he diagnosed I had widespread tendinitis, and he gave me some physio to do, and basically said he didn't need to see me again. Either I would have done this physio to strengthen these core muscles and I'd be much better, or I wouldn't have been doing the work he had given me, so what would be the point in seeing me? Literally. And that was it. No further appointments booked. So I came home, I bought a couple of things, a green big roller thing to put my leg on to do some of the exercises. You know, I took it seriously. I really thought, this is going to crack it. I just need to strengthen my core muscles and I'm going to be all well again. Brilliant result. And I started trying to do these exercises. My husband would support me. He'd help move bits around and count my repetitions for me. And it became increasingly obvious there was no chance I was going to be able to do what he recommended I do. We've all read the fact that, you know, if something is hurting, properly hurting, not just some muscle ache, but proper pain, you need to stop exercising. It's advice given on the NHS website and everywhere else. And that was the case. I know I'm not fit and healthy, but throughout my life I've been relatively. I mean, I used to dance as a child. I've done, you know, the odd 10-mile sponsored walk when I was younger, and maybe 5-mile ones in more recent years to that. So I knew the difference between muscles aching after use and pain, proper pain. And even just doing 3-4 repetitions of the exercises he had given me for my legs, and I think there were some arm ones as well, but it's principally my legs, that I couldn't do it anymore. It was agonising. So I went back to my GP again and explained to the GP what the consultant had said, the rheumatologist, and the fact that I've tried these and, you know, it was impossibly painful, and he didn't believe in fibromyalgia. At which point she totally apologised to me for that, and she said that she was going to keep me under her care and I would continue on the medications I'd got. We'd keep looking into, considering different things. More blood tests were still happening, and it stayed like that for a while. And then out of the blue at some point, during this time, my my work was still going on at reduced hours, but I was starting to have various days off here and there because, well, if you've got fibromyalgia you understand flare-ups. It was just impossible. Something like a big thunderstorm would trigger an issue. It was beyond my control. So we were at a position that what's going to happen? You know, I had this unknown condition and I was just sort of in limbo for a while. I was waiting to see a different rheumatologist, one that maybe had some idea that fibromyalgia did exist. And then I had a phone call out of the blue from my GP who said there'd been a change in legislation and primary care physicians were now at this point allowed to diagnose fibromyalgia for themselves, and given the fact that my full range of symptoms, not just the muscle pain but all the others, basically pointed definitely to fibromyalgia, we'd considered, because of my exhaustion, ME, but because pain was my primary symptom with the exhaustion being second, it led more in the direction of fibromyalgia than ME at that point. That was what research said. So I finally got that diagnosis, which was fantastic. You know, I'm not a label, I'm not fibromyalgia, but to have a diagnosis meant you could continue to research and you know, find people who had fibromyalgia. That was when I found things like the Fibroid Blockers Directory, which I'm part of, and various other places where I can talk to people with fibro. And actually that triggered the creation of the blog, which these videos are now the second stage of building the journey that has become, you know, the blog and now the vlog. So that is my journey to fibromyalgia. I was really fortunate, if I'm honest. My symptoms started, so we're looking at end of July-ish 2015, and I had my official diagnosis in 2016, probably about, fibro fog and memory about these things, I'm guessing May-ish, so just under the year. At that point you had to have had the symptoms for over 6 months, which I clearly did have. I'm well aware that certain people have been really unfortunate and their diagnosis has taken literally years to come about. I credit a lot of that to my GP. She's a relatively young doctor who clearly is up to date with contemporary conditions and what is happening. I pity anyone who's stuck with a GP who has the attitude of that initial rheumatologist I saw. But yeah, that is my story, how I went from a standard human being to somebody living the fibromyalgia life with chronic pain. In terms of, you know, my work story, that had to change. It changed in 2017, about May time. I was off at that point and I ended up being off about a month because I literally had a triple flare-up. It was like one in 1 week, one in the next week, one in the week after, mostly external triggers like weather and so on, and it just became, you know, impossible. It's, you know, it's my personality that I hate letting people down. You know, if I'm going to do something, I'm really going to do my best to do it properly, and I just couldn't bear to be in a situation of any given day with zero notice having to ring my employer and say, can't come in today. And that is the reality when you've got fibromyalgia, that you don't know which days are going to be your worst ones. So I took the decision that, well, I've written a blog post about this, but I basically asked to be dismissed for ill health. It wasn't an easy decision. Have I regretted that decision? Health based? No. Obviously there are regrets, because I was actually really loving the job I was doing at the time, and you know, a future career could have grown from that quite easily. There's a sadness there. There's a sadness that I might not achieve those things, but through the work I'm now doing through the blog, and hopefully these videos and vlogs as they grow from here, I'm hoping to at least be able to share some knowledge with you and share the journey with you. So feel I'm being productive and working within the fibromyalgia community. So I'm on a whole new journey. Fibromyalgia, it hasn't ended me and put a stop to me. It's just put me on a different road, on a new journey. And as scary as this journey is, it's exciting as well. I've met some new people virtually. Most of the fibromyalgia community meets virtually by nature of our conditions. But yeah, I've met some great people, and I get to do, you know, things I'd like to do, my crafting, my genealogy, being creative. But I equally, if it's hard, if it's a bad day, I just get to stop and rest and stop small problems flaring into something big, because I can nip things in the bud. So allowing myself to plan for, say, a big activity and have a few quiet days before it, and plan to not need to do anything of any importance for a few days afterwards, makes all the difference. So there you have it. That is my story of my journey. Hope you found it quite interesting. I'd love to know, you know, what your journey's like. Are you on that journey now? You know, maybe you've recently started having symptoms and you're like I was in the early days, looking around for possible you know, situations that match your own. Maybe you've had fibromyalgia a similar length of time to me, or perhaps you're, you know, one of the real oracles on this and you've been living with this condition for a long time. Either way, I'd love to hear in the comments below about, you know, your situation, where you're up to on the journey. And I hope you found this interesting, even if not useful. And next time, as I mentioned, I'm going to be back with a bit more light-hearted story about my accident-prone past. Until then, bye.